Hey everyone, it is Gabe from Babylon Journey, and in this episode we are going to make some pretty epic like flickering neon signage. We're going to do that using things like a glow layer to get that nice flicker neon effect, and I'm going to show you a few different methods of getting text into the scene. One of them using a really cool new class in the Babylon library called a GreasedLine. And that's the reason why I've updated the Babylon package version in the sandbox, by the way, up to 6.9. Okay, as usual, I'm going to have two code sandboxes, one as the starter project that you can fork and then follow along, and then one for the final project if you just want to see the code for the final demo, and then fork that and modify that. This demo is based on an example in the Babylon documentation that showed me how to make text using the GreasedLine, but then I've done some special sauce on top of it to get that cool neon flicker effect that I want to show you. All right, this video shouldn't be too long compared to my other ones. I'm hoping we can rip through this in about 10 minutes. Okay, now for the starter project, I have some typical like boilerplate stuff that we've done so many times we don't need to do again. Setting up the canvas, the engine, and the scene. I've set up a light. We've got an arc rotate camera, which we know is that camera that will rotate around a pivot point. Of course, we're running the render loop to actually render the scene. I've made a ground using the create ground helper function. I've made it really big too, width and height 500 by 500. And I wanted the ground to be reflective because I want our signage, our neon flickering signs, to reflect on the ground. That's why the ground you see here is very reflective. Right, we got this like skybox, and it's also set as the environment texture so that PBR materials in the scene will reflect it. So that's why the ground is so reflective there. We learned in the previous the episode about PBR materials versus standard materials, the difference between them and what makes this metallic property actually work and make it reflective. Okay. And then finally, I wanted a nice juicy font for the signage itself, and I needed the font information as in JSON, not TFF. Now there are tools online. I'll put a link in the YouTube video description to upload a TFF like font file, and then it'll send you back JSON, which is pretty cool. Okay, I forget if it's TFF or TTF, whatever font. You can download from Google Fonts, like the font itself, but then you can convert it to JSON. All right, let's dive in. So first off, I need a function that will actually use this new greased line to make some text. Okay. And I'm going to make this function, I'll make it right up here above get font. I'm going to call it const draw text. Okay? And we're going to need to pass in some point information. Basically, greased line, like you give it a set of points, and then it'll draw a line around those points. Really cool. Okay. And I believe, by the way, the bulk of this greased line class was actually made by someone in the Babylon community, actually not a core teammate. And then everyone came together to work on it, of course, but pretty cool community contribution, I think. All right, so let's say const text lines equals, and here we're going to do create greased line. This is not my function. This is a function from the Babylon library. Okay, and we'll call it text lines. And it requires point information. This is where we pass in points. Fair enough. And it also needs information, options you can set about the material of the grease line. And basically, for the material type, we want a nice, fancy PBR material, which is defined as an enum here. You can pick PBR or standard. We want PBR. This is why I've imported, things like this, greased line mesh material type, in the imports. Okay. Now we also want to set the color blend mode. Okay. So we're going to set the color mode, and it's going to be greased line mesh color mode, and we want multiply. That kind of will blend colors together rather than add them together, which just makes it more bright. We want multiply. All right, lovely. And then finally, I believe we need to pass in the width. And we're going to hard code the width to all of our lines to 0.8. Okay, that will create the greased line, but then after this, we want to actually return our greased line out of this function. There we go. So now we've got a generic function that will create greased lines for us with PBR materials, multiplied color mode, and then it'll return that greased line to us. Fantastic. Let's use it. Now I need to make sure my font info is loaded before I try to use the font itself. So I want to do getFont.then. This will only run really once this has executed, this async function. So we're going to do getFont.then. Let me scroll down a little bit. And we're going to get our font back to us. And then ultimately, we're going to work with it. Because we need to actually generate the points to send to this draw text function. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say GreasedLine 1. Now GreasedLine points equals GreasedLine tools. This is another class. This is another import from the Babylon library. Get points from text. This is so powerful. And now what I'm going to do is write the text I want to say in my line, Babylon journey. And I'm going to put the size of it, the resolution of it, how many kind of segments it has, and then you pass in your font data, which is so cool. And now that is pretty much it. We're going to do get font. This is a function itself, so I need to actually call it getFont.then font. And let's see what I am doing wrong here. There we go. Okay, lovely. Okay, now let's see what this, I don't think it'll look like much yet, because as you see, I'm not actually using the points I'm getting from this GreasedLine tool, get points from text. So I need to actually pass this in to our draw text function that we made above. So I'm going to say GreasedLine 1 equals draw text, and then let's pass in our GreasedLine points. Okay. So to recap, we've made a generic function that draws text, and in that function, it calls the create GreasedLine function. And it returns, in theory, a nice greased line. Now, we need points to send into this. So we made points by using this GreasedLine tool, get points from text. We've taken those points and we've passed them into our draw text function, which might actually show us something to look at already. Let's see. Well, I don't see anything yet. Let me refresh. There it is. So that's pretty cool. And you can see it's got this big juicy, this is the font I've chosen, which you might hate, but I kind of like it. And I see it sometimes in neon signage. Okay. So how can we make this look cooler, and how can we make it glow? Well, first I want to get a few examples of text here in the scene, and then we're going to work with those a bit to make them sparkle. First up though, we know that we've got a PBR material here. So let's actually adjust some of the parameters of the PBR property and go from there. All right, so I'm going to say GreasedLine 1. First, let's raise it up off the ground a little bit. See how it's right at the ground, it's to where it's cutting off the very bottom of the text. So let's say position.y, position on the y-axis up equals, let's give it a 30. And let's rotate it a tiny little bit. So I'm going to say rotation.x equals negative math.pi divided by 0.5. So it's just going to be a little bit rotated. Okay. Now let's say, let's grab our PBR material. Okay. And we know it's already got a PBR material because we created it that way in our create GreasedLine function. We set the material type to PBR. So we know that when we access the material of it, it's going to be a PBR material. And let's make it metallic, really metallic. I want it to be really reflective and give it just a little bit of roughness. Okay? And let's give it some emissive color. Now, emissive color is really cool. It's kind of like, imagine the mesh sort of having it itself being a bit of a light source and emitting color. This is going to be the color that it emits, and you can set this. And you can also set its intensity. So we're going to set its emissive intensity to be 0.5. Let's save that, and let's see what our adjustments to the PBR material have done to this line. Hey, that looks pretty slick in terms of a nice little, just simple kind of neon looking color. This is going to really sparkle once we get our glow layer in here to get that like neon crackle effect. Okay, pretty cool. Let's go ahead though and make another greased line. Okay, and to do this, you don't need to see me rewrite it all. Let's just copy this entire two functions, bring them down, but now I'm going to call this GreasedLine points 2. It can also say Babylon Journey, that's fine. We're going to say GreasedLine 2. The points it's going to draw are second points. And all these are going to say 2 instead of 1. And instead of PBR1, we're going to say PBR2. Because we're going to make this material a little bit different. Okay. All right. First up, let's go ahead and make it a little bit higher than the other one. We don't want them right smack on top of each other. We'll change its rotation a little bit. Instead of negative math.pi divided by 0.5, we're going to make it positive. PBR2, let's make this one a little bit different. I'm going to make it metallic 0, roughness 0, and we're going to give this one a little bit of tint, subsurface tint. Okay. Now we talked about this in the PBR materials episode. Go back to that one if you need. We're going to do PBR2.subsurface. That is refraction enabled, true. Okay, we want light to refract through this one, and we're going to say, I need a cap right here. Subsurface. You can set the index of refraction 1.5, and we want the tint color to be a new color 3, and we're going to pass in 0.55, be kind of a dark color here, and we're going to make that same color the emissive color, and that emissive intensity looks fine. So in theory now we should have two greased lines, one kind of on top of the other. Let's see how we did. And one should be a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit of a tint color. Okay, there we go. Lovely. Okay, nice. And these are just so big. It's okay. The scene is kind of on a really grand scale, and that's okay. That's looking pretty gorgeous. I love it. Okay. Now, let's get into another way of making text, which is making 3D text using this new create text method in the Babylon library. And I actually recently used this in the create 3D text feature in Frame, which is the product I work on. And actually, just to show that off really fast, I want to show it to you all. It's pretty sweet. So you can, here I am in Frame. Looks like I'm not logged in, so I'm going to need to. Here we go. Sign in right in. Okay, perfect. Don't need this tutorial, thank you though. And you can see one of the assets you can add in here is 3D text. Boom, and here it is. Looks really cool. And once here, you can do all sorts of cool things to it, like add shaders. And I'm going to get into shaders in a future lesson. But how epic is that? Very. Okay. Don't mean to get sidetracked though. Let's go ahead and use this to make really juicy 3D geometric text. So here we go. We are going to scroll down. Let's make this one, let's call this one geotext, and create text. This is not my function, this is a Babylon function. That's why I've imported it up above. And give the mesh a name, but what is it? What is the text we actually want to pass in? Also, let's just do Babylon journey. It needs font information, so there's the font. It's got an options object. We're going to say size 8, resolution 64, depth 3. Depth is how thick that text is. We're going to say depth 3. And it also needs the scene, and it needs ear cut. Now, what is ear cut? Ear cut is another library you've got to import that kind of helps with these like shaping functions that can shape a mesh. Instead of just like a cube or a sphere, kind of like a more particular shape. And this is certainly a particular shape. It's kind of like carving out this 3D geometry representing the text. All right, so we've got geotext. That'll actually create it for us, as simple as that, which is really cool. But we want to give it a position. Let's get it up off the ground, so position.y. And let's move it a little bit over to the left. I think GreasedLine 1 position.x is just at 0. GreasedLine 2, let's give it a position.x. I don't want these just like stacked. It'll help us kind of visually see them apart from each other. So let's make this one 20. And then the geometric, we're going to make, say negative 20. Let's just see what that looks like real fast. Okay, look at this juicy, thick text we just made. So you can see compared to GreasedLine, now you can get GreasedLine to look thick, and it actually has some thickness to it, because that GreasedLine tools function to generate points from text, it let you pass in, like you can adjust the thickness this way too. But I just wanted to show you the use of this other function for specifically making like big, juicy, blocky geometric text. It's a handy one. Okay, fair enough. Now we need to add our glow layer. I want to make these have this like neon sizzle, like imagine, you know, a neon sign where the electricity is kind of going in and out and it's doing this dramatic like light up effect. We want that. So how are we going to do it? Well, what I would suggest is a glow layer. This is a really cool Babylon class called glow layer, and we're going to use it. So first, let's make our glow layer. We're going to say const glow equals glow layer, and we'll call this layer glow. You can have multiple glow layers, which we don't need to, have for this scene, but I could show you why you might want to in a little bit. But we just need one, so we're just going to say glow layer, and we're going to give it a blur kernel size of 128. And you don't need to worry too much about this. This kind of gets into like how blurry the glow is, and sometimes you want it. Well, sometimes you want to adjust this for performance reasons. I experimented with this one a little bit, and this one just looked pretty good, so I liked it. And we're going to give it an intensity of 1. Now, we want the things in the glow layer to not just use their own emissive color to glow. We also want it to use their nice fancy PBR materials to provide that that glowing effect. So we've got a function, reference mesh, to use its own material. And we want this to happen on all of our 3 meshes. So for each of them, we're going to say reference mesh to use its own material instead of just its emissive color. Okay. That is lovely, but I also want, as I said, to get some reflections on the floor. And to do this, we're going to make a screen space rendering pipeline. Okay? And it's actually quite easy to do, and Babylon recently revamped their screen space rendering pipeline to make it even more gorgeous and even more performant, and I absolutely love it. This was a great chance to get exposed to it. So we're going to say new SSR rendering pipeline. We're going to call it SSR. We pass in the scene, and you pass in the scene's active camera. Okay. We don't need to force this geometry buffer. I'm not going to get into these details right now. The key one, though, is to keep in mind is that we have to pass in the camera, because these rendering pipelines, they impact everything in the camera. Okay. It's like a post-process effect on the camera. Think about like an Instagram filter, but it's like that for your WebGL scene. It's pretty cool. And there are tons of really interesting post-processing effects that you can make use of in babylonjs. Okay. All right. We have made our SSR rendering pipeline. I want to give it the same environment texture as the scene. Okay, we're going to say strength equals 1, and the step equals 5. Now the way they explain step is handy. Gets or sets the step size used to iterate until the effect finds the color of the reflections pixel. So you can use higher values to improve performance, but at the expense of quality. Okay. So fair enough. I found that step equals 5 did just fine. Now let's see really fast what this looks like just right now. We've added this glow layer. We've added this SSR screen space reflection pipeline. Okay, glow layer cannot be invoked without name. Right, this is a new instance of a class, so I need new glow layer, not just glow layer. No, I don't want to save it, I just want to refresh. Okay, very, very nice. You can see now, oof, check out the intensity of that, of the glow. But really importantly, look, we've got our reflections on our ground, which we know we set to be pretty metallic. It's going to be pretty reflective. But that glow just looks a little bit intense. It's actually not too bad from certain angles. Now I see that our Babylon Journey geo text is looking a little bit washed out. I'm going to refine its PBR material a little bit. But also the glow layer is static. I want this nice flickering effect, and I don't have that just yet. So we need to do that as well. But first, let's adjust the material of our geo text. Okay, I'm going to say we got to define a new PBR material, because the other ones, they had a PBR material because we passed that in when they were created in this create GreasedLine. But the create 3D text function here, it doesn't do that automatically. So we need, say, make a new PBR material, new PBR material, and let's make it pretty metallic. Okay. And let's give it a PBR material. Let's give it an albedo color. Albedo color. And you can see its description of that. Well, first let me go ahead and define the color. I'll make it yellow. Remember, you can do color 3 dot and a lot of common colors as a function, and instead of needing to define each of the values like we did up here. Okay. Also known as diffuse color in other nomenclature. Okay. So this will just pretty much be like its color. And then let's make its roughness equal 0. All right. Now, to actually make the this flickering effect, as I said, we need something that actually updates pretty frequently. In fact, I want to update the intensity of the glow layer like pretty frequently. That's how I'm going to achieve that flickering effect, okay? So let's go ahead and, silly me, I forgot to actually set the geotext.material to be my new PBR material. So let's actually look at that new material we have. Nice. Okay, now let's make this stuff flicker. So I'm going to go into our classic way of running code that executes like before every single frame on before render observable. Okay. And inside of this, let's think about what we want to do, right? First I want to say well, we've got a minimum intensity and a maximum intensity of the glow layer. That's kind of what I want. And we can define this outside of the render loop. Min intensity, let's say 0.3, and max intensity 0.8. Okay. Now inside the render loop, what I want to do is every like 1/10 of a second, I mean every once in a while, but frequently. So math.random returns a number between 0 and 1. Okay. So I'm going to say if math.random is less than 0.1, then do some stuff. And the stuff I wanted to do is let intensity equals, it's going to be somewhere between the min intensity and the max intensity, right? So I want min intensity plus math.random times max intensity minus min intensity. Okay. So what's going on here? We're basically saying every scene, every frame, we're going to recalculate the intensity we want for our glow layer. And we want it to be somewhere in between min intensity and max intensity. So I'm going to do, it's going to be at least min intensity, right? So min intensity plus, but then what it's going to be is some random number that is the difference between the max and the min. That way we're always guaranteed to get a number in between the min and the max. Now finally, we need to actually set the glow layer. Glow.intensity equals our new intensity value. And just to make this a little more clear, new intensity. Okay, lovely. Let new intensity, did I just spell this wrong? New intensity is declared, but its value is never read. That's because I need this to be tucked in there. Okay, see what this looks like. Check it out. We have got some gorgeous flickering effects because basically, and notice how it's happening, you know, not every, it's like math.random, basically like every 1/10 of a second, it's going to be updating. And it's updating between 0.3 and 0.8 for the intensity of the glow layer. So that's why they're all updating. And you can see that the updates also reflect in the reflections, which is really cool for like this epic, you know, kind of imagining this like anime scene, very dark, reflective surfaces everywhere, neon signs everywhere reflecting, super cool, super flashy. And screen space reflections are really good, this rendering pipeline, and it'll update in real time in other ways too. So if we animated this mesh, you'd see the reflection animate too. I'll show you what I mean. So also in the observable, let's grab our geotext and let's rotate it. We want to rotate it on the y axis. That's vector3.up, shorthand for the y axis. Let's do 0.002. That's how much it's going to rotate. And we want it to rotate in local space. Could do world space. Doesn't make much of a difference if it's just rotating this way. But check it out. There we go. See, it's got this nice slow rotation on it, but look at the reflection. That reflection is coming right along for the ride, which is totally sweet. We've got our lovely emissive colors coming through, and the intensity of the glow layer is what's giving it that modulating brightness, which is super cool. All right, there you have it. So I thought this was going to take 10 minutes, but it took more like 30. Apologies for that, but I hope it was worth it. Some cool techniques to make text and some cool techniques to get reflectivity, and using the glow layer to get a nice little flicker on this neon text effect. Okay, I will see you next time.